So here we are back with part 2 of the video, and I'm suspecting some sharp-eyed viewers may notice I changed hooks, and the reason I did that is I had a camera problem, and I was merrily working along on my lure here and realized the camera wasn't filming properly. So anyway, I have several other new hooks that I'm going to do. So first of all, I'm going to take the tape off. And whenever you cut aluminum, you leave a rather ragged edge. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my Pilot high-tech 0.5 millimeter tip, and I'm going to use the soft end on it, and I'm going to burnish down these rough edges. And I'm not sure if you can actually see what that's doing, but it's taking down that rough edge that catches so much light, and it pushes it back down again. So when you paint this, you won't have areas that won't take paint. That's the biggest problem with these edges, is when you paint, you can't cover them. So they glint and they show a rough edge. So okay, so this area is done. I've also burnished the top lumps and bumps out of it, crinkles. So one of the things I like to do about now is I like to do the eye. So I push the eye in with my finger, and you see a nice glimmer of the eye. Now, one of the things that you do with the eye is you cut around it, not quite at the edge. You move in a little bit. This is not meant to be a precision cut. And what happens is you'll use that same pen and you'll fold that little edge around the hole. And what that does, it makes a very nice background for your eye to sit against. So when you finally pour epoxy into it, it looks very, very nice. So once again, you use your pen and you just go around the inside of that. And that just makes a beautiful edge. I don't know if you can actually see that there, how it goes down into the wooden surface. Okay, so as I continue to work on this, and remember I talked about crinkles, permanent crinkles, and what you do with the permanent crinkle is you start at the top, up here, and you work yourself way down, and you use the end again, but now you put quite a bit of pressure on it. And what happens is the aluminum is so soft, it kind of reforms itself. It's like making pizza dough with a rolling pin, and it just moves it around, and it makes it very, very, very unnoticeable, or less noticeable. Some of the smaller ones, you certainly can get rid of them totally. Some of the bigger ones, you can't. So anyway, so there we've got that. We also, of course, go along the back, and use your light to find any little voids that haven't stuck. And again, I said I did the back here. I got rid of the crinkles in the back, but there still are a few permanent ones there as well. So now what you can also do is, if you notice on this pen, there's an area along the back here that has no writing. The writing is surprisingly abrasive, so you can actually use that whole pen. And what that does is sometimes when the aluminum comes off the roll, you get sort of stripes on it, and that's from the glue pulling away from the paper. And this can do a really nice job. And then you just kind of polish away any aluminum oxide, and it comes out beautifully shiny. So now what I'm going to do is I have a couple more cuts to make. One is a little different. This one here is along the flat face. Now, if I try to use tape along this side, it's always difficult, and what happens is the tape may be not quite right and you may cut over top, and quite often what happens is you make a scar on the face and you have to fix it. So I want to make a cut right along here, but in a little bit. So I want to be on this side. So let's see if I can do this. I do this pretty good sometimes, but you know what? So what I'm trying to do right now is get the light just right so I can see that edge. So here I go. Okay. And I didn't do all the way for a reason. When you pull on the point like this, sometimes it'll pull back on you. So when you're cutting into a sharp point like that, you always want to go in the same direction as the point. So let me finish this guy by doing this. There we go. Now remember, after you paint this, you won't see this top edge. So if the tape, which comes in roughly 2-inch wide strips, is if it's a tiny bit narrow, make sure it's good for the bottom and leave a little bit on top, because as I said, the top you won't see. So now I'm going to cut this piece off. This piece is quite easy. It's not a complete cut. So what I do is I put my tape in the general area. And I mark my cut. So what I always do is as I said before, is I cut my aluminum this way first. And then again, I hold it very securely and I dig that point in. But you got to be careful that doesn't get away on you. Okay, so let's see how we've done here. Okay, so that edge is done as well. Okay, and once again, I use my pen to burnish that edge. One thing this aluminum always does as well is if you've got any little goobers from the painting process prior, they will certainly show right through that. But you know what, there's so much glitter, you don't really notice it. So here's how you cut the tail off of the aluminum. You put the scalpel heel on the aluminum and just roll it over top. And there you go. And of course, once again, you burnish that side. Now, we're done the aluminum work for this side so far, except for one thing, gills. So I always cut my gills into the aluminum. So what I do is I use the picture that I printed out, and I scribe that picture of the lure onto a piece of cardboard. So I printed the picture of the lure, I cut it out, and then I cut out on the inside of the gills. And then I take that piece of paper, which is very, very hard to work with from a template point of view, and I scribe it onto a piece of cardboard. Now this cardboard happens to be a birthday card or a Christmas card that my family has given me. So it works great. It's just the right thickness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up, line up the tail here, kind of line up where the gill area is, and I'm going to use my pen now. Now I'm going to use the tip of it, and I'm going to scratch the surface . Now I'm not trying to leave the ink, I'm trying to leave the scratch. So I'm going to come back here in just a second and cut that. but I'm not quite done my gill because I've got to put the inside. So this is, if you look at this, this is a part of that same cutout. And on this one, I've cut out the part of the gill towards the head, where on this other one, I cut out the gill towards the tail. So this is a little bit tricky. I always mark the eye, and in this case, the eye goes this way, and then I kind of line it up as best I can. Use as many fingers as you got that you can. Now when you're doing the second side now, you're gonna try and make these line up one side to another. Okay, so I think in the light you can have a glance and see that scratching. Now the paint, or the ink rather, from the pen is water-based in this pen. So you just lick a tissue and it comes right off, which is great. Now one of the things for symmetry when you're doing the other side is you'll mark this edge on this other side and you'll mark this edge on the other side. So when you're lining up this guy and this template again, they'll be symmetrical side to side. So now the tougher part. Now I have to move the lure to be able to catch, so the light can catch the hole. So first of all, I'm going to cut the inside ones. Now I always like to sharpen up my scalpels. You can only, the scalpel blade, you can only sharpen them so often. Very, very hard metal. But a sharp scalpel works wonderfully. So now what I'm doing, and I'm sure you can't see this, but I've got the scalpel tip right in the scratch that I made with the pen. And you'll notice that I'm moving the lure, and I'm doing that, moving the lure more than I am the scalpel, and that's just to be able to catch the light so I can see where I'm cutting. Now, I notice that I haven't made a very deep scratch on this side, so I'm going to have to be very careful to make sure that I get it right. And sometimes I have to make a kind of a two attempts here at joining the cut. Okay, so as I go around the corner now, again, moving the lure to catch the room light, which is not exactly trivial. And I go all the way to the top. Okay, so that's the inside one done. Now, when I do this guy, the bottom, or the tail part of I always start a little bit farther up, because if I don't do that, when I make that deep cut, it can pull back the aluminum foil. So there I made my initial cut, and here I am going around trying to finish the cut here. Now, the last thing you want is for that scalpel to get away on you. So you're holding this very tight and you're moving the lure very hard to see sometimes. Okay, so there's the lure with its gills cut. So now missed a piece here. Now you kind of pick at it a little bit with the tip of your scalpel, and you get it going and you start to pull, but you be careful around the little corners here, because that's sometimes where you can not cut quite right. So what happens if you keep pulling, you'll actually tear the tape, which is not a good thing. Yeah, see, it's giving me a little bit of grief here, so I'll work carefully with the tip. And pull it all the way off. And of course, as usual, I always fix up the edges. Okay, that will be the end of this part of the video. This will be part 2.